All right, let's get into this. Origins of Lilith.
What if there was a demon so dangerous that even God couldn't control her? And see, her story isn't just some old dusty myth. It's actually a key to understanding the forces shaping your life right now, the ones that are working
Well, this
behind the
don't hold
scenes,
it
pulling the
today.
strings. So you've heard of Adam and Eve, the original couple, the supposed foundation of humanity. But what if I told you the story is actually missing a chapter, a forbidden chapter that they don't want you to know about? Because before Eve, there was someone else. And the Bible doesn't tell you very much about this, but if you dig deeper, if you look into the books they don't teach you about in Sunday school, you'll uncover something shocking. According to those books, there was another woman before Eve, a woman who refused to submit.
Is that a tattoo or is that a necklace? Like, if it's a tattoo, all right, I don't like it, but understandable. If it's a necklace, isn't that uncomfortable? What is going on?
Or be some sidekick, and her name was Lilith. And in these mystical texts, there's a dark secret, and one that's so shocking, it's actually been called the secret of secrets. In fact, Lilith is so powerful that she hooked up with the angel of death and even seduced God himself. Yeah, you heard that right. And here's the crazy part. Her story isn't just about some ancient myth or forgotten texts. It's about you. It's about a secret power that you've been taught to suppress. Think about it. Why is her name associated with everything that society tells you to fear? Darkness, lust, chaos, destruction. Was she actually a demon, as the old rabbis would have you believe? But then why do some people say she's not a monster at all? Something way more powerful. An archetype of power, rebellion, and freedom. So who was Lilith? And more importantly, what does her story have to do with you? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to question everything you thought you knew about good and evil, about power and control, and about the lines between rebellion and freedom. And it's about a battle that's happening right now, in real time. Look around the world right now. Women are losing hard-fought rights. Rights to their bodies, to make choices about their future, to live free from oppression. So here's the question I want you to think about. If Lilith was so dangerous that even God himself couldn't handle her, what does that say about her real power? And what does it say about yours, about ours? You see, they say that Lilith was Adam's first wife, but she's a lot different. She didn't come from Adam's rib like Eve. She was made from the same clay, equal in every way, and that's where the trouble started, because Lilith didn't submit. And when Adam tried to force her to, she didn't just defy Adam, she defied God. She uttered the secret, ineffable name of God, a name so powerful that it can actually rewrite reality, and she transformed into a being of immense power and flew out of Eden. But here's the thing, Lilith didn't just disappear after leaving Eden. No, she became something far more powerful. While Adam and Eve were busy naming animals and getting slapped with fruit-related misdemeanors, Lilith was out here hooking up with Satan, seducing angels, and earning herself as a reputation as the original bad bitch of mythology. In fact, she would even seduce God himself. But let me ask you this. Was Lilith actually the villain here, or was she simply the one character who refused to play by her assigned role? And more importantly, what does her story have to do with you? My name is Morgan. I'm an ex-Christian revealing hidden knowledge the church doesn't want you to know. And by the end of this video, you're going to see how Lilith's defiance isn't just a myth. It's about a war being fought right now and a power that's inside you, one that you've been taught to fear and suppress and demonize. So who was Lilith really? From her Sumerian origins, to her transformation into Adam's rebellious ex, to her cosmic power struggle and marriage with Samael, the angel of death, and her seduction of God, Lilith's story is as shocking as it is powerful. So get ready, because this is the tale of the woman who said no to paradise and yes to her own power. And trust me, it's not what you think. So what if I told you that Lilith's story doesn't begin in the Bible? In fact, they go a lot further back than Yahweh, further than Adam, further than the very idea of the Garden of Eden, way before Yahweh was even handing out commandments, drowning anyone who disagreed with him, and turning people into salt for looking the wrong way. Lilith was haunting deserts and turning heads in ancient Mesopotamian myths, and we're talking thousands of years before Genesis was even a rough draft. Her earliest traces can be found in ancient Mesopotamian texts, where she appears not as just a singular being, but as part of a class of evil demons known as Lilu, or Lilitu. And if you thought today's bad press for women was rough, back then, they blamed these night spirits for everything. Nightmares? Lilitu. Disease? Definitely Lilitu. Men getting a little too restless in their sleep? Lilitu. It gets even better. The name Lilitu literally translates to night, which is already a pretty ominous title. But if you dig deeper into Sumerian and Akkadian mythology, it's clear that they were terrified of her. Lilitu's spirits were blamed for infant mortality, seductive temptations, and generally just wreaking havoc wherever they went. They were basically the scapegoats for every bad thing that happened. And here's where the ancient world really went off the rails. Over time, Lilith got lumped in with other fearsome figures, like Lamashtu, a demon who had a reputation for snatching babies. This blending of myths created a terrifying archetype, pure nightmare fuel. But let's be honest here, the ancient world has a weird habit of blaming women for literally everything. Crops failing? Must be Lilith. Bad weather? Lilith. Your toddler throwing a tantrum because you wouldn't buy them a clay tablet? Yeah, probably Lilith. It's almost like these guys were sitting around inventing ways to avoid accountability. Now, was this out of fear? Was it for control, or was it just good old-fashioned patriarchal propaganda? So this is a pattern, a narrative that's designed to vilify powerful women and to turn feminine independence into something terrifying. And that brings us to the real question here. What does this ancient myth say about us, about the way power, especially feminine power, is treated today? Because let me tell you, some things really haven't changed. But first, I want to talk about the version of Genesis that they don't want you to know about. Now, this one is buried in Jewish rabbinic texts, whispered in mystical traditions, and it's really kept out of the mainstream. But according to these texts, Adam didn't start with Eve, because before Eve, there was Lilith. So in a book known as the Alphabet of Ben-Sira, written around 700 to 1000 CE, Lilith wasn't made from Adam's rib. She was created from the dust of the same ground. And they were equals in every way. Yeah, actually equal. And as we know, history, and apparently theology, has a funny way of being allergic to equality when it involves women. But equality wasn't enough for Adam. You see, Adam wasn't looking for a partner. He was looking for someone who would obey him. Lilith was not having it. This wasn't a minor disagreement. This was a full-blown cosmic showdown. And at the center of all this, a heated argument over who gets to be on top during sex. Yeah, Adam demanded her submission, but Lilith refused. You see, in the Alphabet of Ben-Sira, Lilith says, "I will not lie below." And Adam said, "I will not lie below, but above, since you are fit for being below, and I for being above." She said to him, "The two of us are equal, since we are both from the earth." So Adam, with his fragile ego, insisted that he was superior and demanded that she submit to him, physically and metaphorically. But the argument grew so intense that Lilith did the unthinkable. She didn't just leave the relationship. She dropped the theological equivalent of an atomic bomb. She spoke the ineffable name of God. This was a divine secret so powerful, it could alter the fabric of existence, and she transformed into a being of terrible power and flew from the Garden of Eden. Now, let's just pause for a minute to appreciate the audacity of the moment. This wasn't just a marital spat here. This was cosmic rebellion. Lilith was walking away from the divine plan itself, a total badass. Adam, now alone and humiliated, goes crying to God, "Lilith won't lie under me. She's gone off and left me." So what does God do? Does he side with Lilith? Does he acknowledge that Lilith is equal? No. He says, "Fine, let's try again." And this time he makes Eve, literally pulling her from Adam's rib like a magic trick, just to ensure that she's a little less, shall we say, free-spirited. Let's call this attempt Wife 2.0, now with extra compliance. See, Lilith wasn't some passive, powerless figure. She was fierce, and for that she was labeled as defiant and dangerous, a threat to everything that Eden was supposed to represent. Lilith's departure wasn't exactly subtle either. She didn't just ghost Adam. She rewrote the rules of existence on her way out. And here's where the story takes a dark turn, because what happens here? God sends 3 angels to chase her down like some kind of divine bounty hunters. They find Lilith in the raging ocean, and they threaten to drown her, but they give her an ultimatum. They track her down and say, "Hey, go back to Adam and submit, or we will kill 100 of your children every day." But Lilith doesn't flinch at all. She just says, "Fine, take my children. I'm not going back." Lilith refused to be controlled, and according to the Zohar, God rebuked her and cast her to the bottom of the sea. Now, on the surface, this might sound like a punishment, banished to the depths, out of sight, out of mind, but I want you to think about what water symbolizes here. Psychologically, the sea represents the unconscious, the hidden, the shadowy parts of our minds where suppressed thoughts and desires live. And so Lilith wasn't just cast out, she was submerged into the unknown, into the depths of the psyche. She becomes the power we're taught to bury. But guess what? A powerful feminine force like that is always going to be a threat. And this is where the smear campaign really kicks into high gear here. Lilith, once Adam's equal, is now painted as a monster, a child killer, a seductress, the mother of demons. Now, according to the Talmud, Lilith was believed to stalk the night and target newborn children and their mothers. The fear of her was so intense that people started creating magical protection rituals to keep her away. Amulets and incantations became the ancient equivalent of baby monitors. And those 3 angels, the ones who tracked her down, Senoi, Sansenoi, and Samangalath, their names were the ones inscribed on these charms as a way to ward her off. But it didn't stop there. It wasn't just babies and mothers who had to worry. Men were warned to watch out too, especially at night, because according to legend, Lilith would prey on them in their sleep. Nocturnal emissions. Yes, those. That was said to be her doing, and this resulted in wasted semen and was believed to be used to create demonic offspring called Lilim. So apparently if you woke up with a mess, it wasn't your fault, it was Lilith's. So you can forget about semen retention with Lilith around. But let's be real here. Does any of this sound like Lilith was actually a threat? Or does it sound more like insecure men projecting their fear of a woman that they couldn't control? I mean, blaming her for your bad dreams and accidents in the night feels more like a personal problem than a cosmic one. So why was Lilith demonized? Because she said no, she refused to submit. And here's the thing, it's not just about her. How many times in history have powerful women been labeled dangerous? How often has society tried to crush those who challenge the status quo? And doesn't all this sound way too familiar? Because it's happening right now. All over the world, women are losing their rights, their autonomy, and control over their own lives. Lilith's story isn't just some ancient myth. It's a reflection of this pattern that's happening right now. But Lilith is not done, not by a long shot. Her story doesn't end with demonization. It's about to take a turn, and trust me, she's not going down quietly. And Lilith is about to have her revenge, because what she does next is insane. And think about this. If Lilith could defy Adam, God, and the entire divine plan, surely you can defy the YouTube algorithm by liking this video and subscribing. You just have to click a button, so go ahead. And if you want to go even deeper, become a member on my channel here. You can access exclusive videos and free downloads to help you transform your consciousness. You'll also find links to my books in the description. Now, just when you think that Lilith's story couldn't get any more controversial, we meet Samael. Who is Samael? The angel of death, the prince of darkness. A being so complex, he's described as both God's enforcer and the adversary. You know what his name means? The venom of God. Pretty badass, right? He's the celestial embodiment of I do what I want. In fact, a lot of people interpret Samael as being Satan himself, or an aspect of Satan. In Jewish mysticism, Samael represents the destructive forces of the universe, the shadow of divine judgment. And when Lilith crosses paths with him, well, it's a match made in heaven. Well, maybe not heaven, but maybe a place a little hotter and more fun. According to the Zohar, which is a central text in the Jewish mystical system of Kabbalah, Lilith and Samael's union is called the secret of secrets. And they form what can ultimately be described as the most badass power couple. It's not the kind you would see on romantic greeting cards here. Their union isn't about love and harmony. It's total chaos, rebellion, raw, untamed power, and sexuality. While Samael executes divine wrath, he's also seen as the embodiment of unchecked judgment. He's the shadow to God's light, the other side of creation. And when Lilith, already exiled and furious, crosses paths with him, sparks fly. Literally, the Zohar describes the bond between Lilith and Samael as emerging from the Sitra Achra, the other side of creation. In other words, the shadow realm, the part of existence that embodies impurity and chaos. But why does the Zohar call this the secret of secrets? Because what's being revealed is that everything has a dark counterpart. Together, Samael and Lilith represent a dark mirror of Adam and Eve, and the Zohar describes Samael and Lilith's unity like a red rose. Together, male and female, red like a rose, they spread out on several sides, down several paths. The male is called Samael, and the female is always included with him. Just as on the side of holiness there are male and female, so on the other side there are male and female, included one with the other. Another Kabbalistic book called Treatise on the Left Emanation says, Samael and Lilith correspond to the forms of Adam and Eve, as above, so below, representing two twin forms. In other words, they put the flame in twin flame. So where Adam and Eve is meant to symbolize divine order and harmony, Lilith and Samael represent rebellion and chaos. They're not building a Garden of Eden, they're tearing it apart. The Zohar goes on to call Lilith the snake, a wife of harlotry, the end of all flesh, the end of days. So the ultimate secret of secrets isn't about their literal partnership, it's about the uncomfortable truth that everything light has a dark counterpart. But they're not just chaotic for chaos's sake. There's a meaning to their madness. They serve a purpose. See, remember that these stories, they're symbolic. And angels usually represent consciousness and order, while demons often represent the unconscious, rebellion and chaos. But think about this. Is the dark energy of rebellion always evil? What about when it comes to dismantling oppressive systems of control? Thomas Jefferson said, a little rebellion now and then is a good thing. And honestly, he was onto something. Without rebellion, we would be suffocated by control. Fascism and oppression thrive when there's nothing to resist, to challenge. So ironically, rebellion and chaos are necessary to maintain balance. Now, let's talk about Samael. He's described as being unable to create. Why? Well, he's pure destruction. He's the destroyer. But luckily, this is where Lilith steps in. She's the mother of demons, after all, the yin to his yang, the one who turns destruction into something productive, if you call demonic offspring productive. See, in the Zohar, Samael is said to transform himself into the serpent and seduces Eve in the Garden of Eden. Meanwhile, Lilith works her magic with Adam in his dreams. Let's just say Adam wakes up with some, unintentional contributions, and Lilith uses his wasted seed to birth legions of demonic offspring, the Lelim. So together, Samael and Lilith, they're like a cosmic wrecking crew. He fuels her fury and she amplifies his chaos. This is not about harmony. It's about escalation. The Zohar even suggests that their destructive energy feeds off human sin, lust, anger, selfishness. Every time humanity indulges in its darker side, Samael and Lilith grow stronger. They thrive on it. But here's the thing. The mystics tell us that without the Sitra Achra, the other side, the shadow, there can be no growth, no transformation. Light can't exist without darkness, and order can't exist without chaos. Samael and Lilith are the parts of ourselves we're too afraid to face, the parts that we would rather ignore. They're the shadow lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for us to stop pretending it doesn't exist. And guess what? If all this sounds a little crazy here, Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, agreed with this. He said, how can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole. Translation, if you're going to be a fully formed person, you can't just focus on love and light and good vibes only. You got to deal with the darker stuff too. Jung introduced the idea of the shadow self. He believed that every one of us has a shadow, a hidden part of our psyche that contains all the traits, all the emotions and desires that we've been taught to reject or suppress. Sound familiar? In other words, the shadow self is our other side, our sitra achra. Jung saw the shadow as both a source of chaos and a reservoir of untapped potential. He argued that to truly grow, we need to confront and integrate our shadow instead of denying it. According to Jung, archetypes, universal symbols that appear across myths, religions, and dreams, help us understand these deeper parts of ourselves. And if you ask me, Lilith is the shadow archetype on steroids. Lilith fits Jung's framework perfectly. She's the part of us that's saying, nope, not doing that when society demands obedience. She's the raw, powerful, untamed energy that refuses to be boxed in. The side of us that's been told, you're too much or tone it down. Society loves to push these parts of us into the shadows. But Jung would say this rejection of Lilith actually reflects a deeper fear, the fear of facing the parts of ourselves that we'd rather ignore. But here's the thing, when you finally stop running from the shadow, that's when the real magic happens. Because by integrating Lilith, the rebellion, the chaos, the parts of you that you've been told to fear, you unlock the full range of who you are. Creativity, strength, authenticity. It's all tied up in that dark side that you've been avoiding. So instead of demonizing the shadow or, demonizing Lilith, Jung would say, why not make friends with it? Because let's be honest here, ignoring the shadow doesn't make it go away. It actually makes it stronger. When we look at Lilith not as a demon, but as a symbol of our hidden power, we begin to see her story not as one of rebellion just for its own sake, but a call for us to integrate the parts of ourselves we've been told to suppress. As Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So embracing Samael and Lilith is not about just giving in to evil or unleashing total destruction on the world. Of course not. It's not about saying, let's burn it all down. It's about something a lot deeper and frankly, harder. It's about facing your own inner darkness and learning how to channel it into something powerful, productive, and transformative. Because the society, religion, and culture, they've spent a lot of time telling you what parts of yourself are acceptable. Too bold, too angry, too ambitious, too emotional, rebellious, or anything that doesn't fit neatly into their box, well, that gets shoved into the shadowy corners of your unconscious. But here's the thing, just like Lilith refused to let Adam and God suppress her, her story is about reclaiming those buried parts of you. It's about rising from the dark waters of the unconscious. Lilith and Samael aren't just figures of darkness in some old story. They're reflections of what's inside all of us. The suppressed rage, the parts of ourselves we'd rather not acknowledge. Their story isn't about them, it's about us. Because here's the truth that no one wants to admit. You can't have the light without the shadow. And the parts of yourself that you're the most scared of, that's where the real power is. Lilith and Samael show us that it's not about denying those parts. It's about acknowledging them, understanding them, and letting them make you whole. Now let me introduce you to a part of the story they rarely talk about, but is totally badass. That is the 4 demon queens. See, Lilith wasn't out there in the shadows all by herself. She had backup, a sisterhood of terrifying and seductive forces. And these queens weren't playing around. Each one had her own dark dominion, her own chaotic brand of power, and together they ruled the other side, the Sitra Achra, the realm where shadows thrive and chaos reigns. And among them, we find Ne'amah, Agrat Bat Malat, and Aishet Zenonim, figures whose legends ripple across the pages of texts like the Zohar, and together they represent the rebellious divine feminine on the other side. So who are these queens? Well, let me break it down for you. Leading the pack, of course, is Lilith, the queen of rebellion and the mother of demons. But alongside her are 3 other figures, Ne'amah, Agrat Bat Malat, and Aishet Zenonim. And you can think of them as Lilith's inner circle, kind of like a dark power council. And these women are sometimes called Lilith's sisters, but some actually say that they're different aspects of Lilith herself. Either way, each of them brings something unique and terrifying to the table. Agrat Bat Malat is known as the angel of prostitution and is said to have revealed secrets of magic to humanity. She didn't just work in the shadows, she taught others how to use them.
The angel of prostitution? I ain't never.
Aishet Zenonim, whose name literally means woman of harlotry, is described in Kabbalistic texts as the personification of sin itself, all the desires that society tells us to suppress. And then there's Ne'amah, who might just be the most infamous of the bunch. See, some believe that she's Lilith's daughter, but the more common interpretation is that it's her sister or an aspect of Lilith. Ne'amah's name means pleasant or beautiful, but don't let her name fool you because she's not just some passive figure here. Yeah, her beauty was said to be otherworldly, but she wasn't just sitting around to look pretty. Ne'amah knew how to use her beauty as a weapon, and she wielded it with devastating results. Her most infamous act? Seducing the Watchers. Now, the Watchers were angels meant to guide humanity. Their job was to keep things running smoothly. But according to the apocryphal book of Enoch, these angels got distracted, very distracted, when they laid eyes on human women. But according to Kabbalistic texts, Ne'amah and Lilith worked together to lure these angels out of the divine realm and into the material world. This was cosmic level seduction, where their beauty was so powerful it literally caused the angels to fall. By drawing the Watchers into forbidden unions, Ne'amah set the stage for the birth of the Nephilim, half human, half angelic giants described in the book of Enoch. And they weren't just big, they were chaos incarnate, shaking the foundations of the earth and divine order. Ne'amah's actions were totally world-altering. These 4 demon queens demons, queens of hell, whether as Lilith's sisters or her different aspects, aren't just villains here. They're the shadows of creation, the chaos that balances order, the rebellion that counters control, the forces that refuse to be tamed. Without them, the divine order would stagnate. Their presence might be terrifying, but it's necessary because light can't shine without darkness and creation can't exist without chaos. And just when you think that Lilith's story couldn't get any stranger, the mystics of the Kabbalah drop a bombshell that changes everything. Get this. Lilith wasn't just Adam's rebellious ex. She wasn't just a demon lurking in the shadows. She wasn't even just Samael's wife. Lilith rises to a role so outrageous, so totally unfathomable, that it flips everything that we think we know on its head. Ready for this? According to the Zohar, during humanity's exile, Lilith didn't just sit on the sidelines plotting revenge or doing generic demon stuff. No, she stepped up and replaced the divine feminine, the Shekinah, as God's consort. Yeah, you heard that right. The same God who cast her out of Eden, who sent angels after her, who threw her to the bottom of the sea, suddenly finds himself paired with her as his celestial queen. So take a moment to let that sink in. Lilith hooked up with Samael, which is basically Satan, and God. The woman who was literally banished from paradise turned around and became God's new partner. If that's not the ultimate cosmic plot twist, I don't know what the hell is. So how does this even happen? How does the most feared, vilified woman in mythology rise to take the place of the Shekinah, the holy feminine presence of God? Well, the Zohar makes it clear that Lilith's ascension wasn't just a fluke. It was a direct result of divine imbalance. You see, the Shekinah, often described as God's bride or the feminine counterpart of his essence, that was exiled right alongside humanity when things started to fall apart. This left a gaping void in the divine hierarchy, and Lilith saw her chance, and she rose to fill that void. She became a symbol of chaos, infiltrating divinity itself, the shadow corrupting the light. Think about it. The woman who was cast out for defying the divine plan doesn't just come back, she returns in a position of ultimate power. Lilith is the cosmic homewrecker, the ultimate outsider who crashed the divine order. And her partnership with God, it represents the infiltration of the Sitra Achra, the other side, the shadow world, into the divine framework. It's as if chaos itself demanded a seat at the table of creation. But what does it mean that Lilith, the so-called ultimate evil, was paired with ultimate divinity? Lilith's rise as God's consort was about the undeniable truth that even divinity itself can't escape the need for balance. Even God has to face his shadow. You can't just throw her to the bottom of the sea. And this changes everything that we thought we knew about Lilith when we understand this. This is all about the shadow within us all, the one that we're too afraid to confront and can take over our lives if we don't acknowledge her. So let me ask you this. Is Lilith actually evil here? Or is she the balance that even God needed? A reminder that the divine can't exist without its shadow. Because when you look at her story in this way, it makes you confront a truth that a lot of us find uncomfortable, that the forces we call evil aren't always the enemy. Sometimes they're the missing piece, the other half of the equation. In other words, this is a reminder that the parts of ourselves we've been taught to reject are the very parts we need to reclaim. Because if we don't, they will cause destruction in our lives. See, the story of Lilith isn't about good versus evil. It's about wholeness. And when we understand ourselves and reality clearly, we come to realize that chaos and order, rebellion and harmony, light and darkness aren't enemies, they're partners. See, for centuries, Lilith was painted as the ultimate villain, a demon, a seductress, a child killer, and she was the ancient world's favorite scapegoat for anything and everything. But guess what? Today, Lilith's story has been reclaimed because she's not just lurking in the shadows. She's stepped into the spotlight as a feminist icon, a symbol of rebellion, autonomy, and refusing to conform. Now, of course, this transformation didn't just happen overnight. It's been shaped by decades of shifting attitudes towards gender, power, and individuality. As feminism challenged patriarchal norms, especially in the 20th and 21st centuries, Lilith's defiance started to feel less like a scary story and more like a reflection of what's happening in the world around us. And her story began to resonate with those seeking freedom from oppression. Think about it. Lilith's refusal to submit to Adam began to resonate with anyone fighting for equal rights, bodily autonomy, or the right to just live on their own terms. Where ancient texts saw her rebellion as dangerous, modern movements saw it as inspiring. She became a symbol of the person who dares to say no, even when it costs them everything. In her exile from Eden, Lilith shows us that sometimes walking away from a system designed to control you is the only way to be free. Then, to find your dark power, come back and crash the system. Her demonization is history's way of dealing with powerful, independent women. It's the same story that we've seen play out again and again. Vilify the ones who step out of line. But here, Lilith didn't stay a demon. She's been embraced in literature, art, and pop culture as a figure of empowerment. Publications like Lilith magazine call her a heroine for the ages, reclaiming her as a force of strength instead of destruction. Writers, poets, musicians, they've all reimagined her as a symbol of resistance against patriarchal control. And let's be honest here, the world needs her now more than ever, in a time when women are still being punished.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look more into that. So I've heard of Lilith plenty of times. I just never heard of her becoming the consort of God after everything was said and done. That part is completely unbeknownst to me and brand new. And this is the first time I ever heard somebody with this outlook and outtake on it speak so fervently and passionately about the positives of Lilith. Usually it's either from like a purely academic, relay of an account of the figure, or it's someone speaking of it in a spiritual sense of the corruption. So to hear someone professing how it's positive so profusely is also new. I'm just wrapping my head around everything and the fact that at the end of it, he's saying that she married God. Okay.